Okay, and so this is where we stopped last week. So we covered how to create a route, and we know how to create the route before, but in this route, we actually tried to connect to the MongoDB and do a query, which you can see here. And it says iq.collection, and then try to find. And okay, so in this particular one, we had more options for the query, which says we limited to five results, essentially 5 and JSON documents, and we sort by price in descending order. And the problem we had last week is, and we keep getting into problems, and when we try to run the code, and so this is the code we created last week, if you remember. So this is the backend. We require the express and also add this part, and that's to avoid the access and cross original access errors. And then we created express apps, and this one is for passing the parameters. Okay, and then this is where we using the MongoDB module, which needs to be installed. And then you can run this by creating a MongoDB client, which is the object we need to use to connect to the MongoDB. And here, and is actually the actual connection. And so that's the protocol. And for example, if you want to access a web server, you type HTTP or HTTPS. And this is for MongoDB. They have a special protocol, and your username, password, and then a specific URL and for your MongoDB. And you would get this string and from the MongoDB Atlas collect interface. Okay, and so if I go to MongoDB and then login, yeah, and you choose connect and say connect to applications, and which you would again view something like this. And this will be different and depend. So this URL will be different and depends on your MongoDB and account. So you need to put your own username password here, and this should be replaced with your database name. Actually, yeah. So in our case, and in my case, and the database is called Web Store, so that's what I used in here. Let me go here. So I'll put a web store here, and you can either put it here or you can do this one here, which you select a different database. Okay, yeah, and that's for getting the collection name parameter. And so this is for this part. And oh, that be. And so basically we have this one, which is the root, which only return a message. It's only showing the server is running, so you can know. And this is one actually getting something from the database. And the here one is the column, which means, and this one will be a parameter that entered by user. So when users send this request, they should replace this part with the actual name of the collection. So in our case, we have two collections, one called orders, the other one called the products. So, and when I try to start the server, I'll try to put /collection/products to do this. Would that be the reason? Okay, and so all these actually are working fine. And the problem we had last week is we can start the server. I think this might be what you're starting. Okay. I'm starting the server now. Okay, and then I can go to the browser and I can type in the URL, and which is localhost 3000. It's a bit harder to see. And you can see a message. This is like the root path, and which is what we coded here. Send this. Yeah, it should be fine. And the problem happens when I try to type in products. The server is down now. Let me restart the server. Okay, and yeah, so I either get this error or some error, slightly different error. So that's where we stuck last week. And the problem is when I try exactly the same code later at home, it all works fine. There's no problem at all. I think someone also told me and during last lecture, say that they do exactly the same code on their computer. That also worked. So yeah. I suspect there might be something to do with the network settings at university, and which interfering you accessing the database, basically the MongoDB Atlas. And so I think I will leave it as it now. And I haven't really found any solution to that yet, because if this is the case, it's not something I can do. And the university have to change certain things and settings on the university network firewalls, for example, which is not something I can do. And so I will leave it this as it is now. Later on, we're going to put the server and we're going to run the backend, which is the equivalent of index.js on Heroku, and which is the external server. And you shouldn't have any problems of this, for example, because the university firewall calls them out. And because in that case, the server would talk to the database, both are external to the university network, so there's not be any concerns. And they don't have to pass through the university firewalls. Okay, and so this week, and we're gonna continue. And then first, and I just want to mention, I sent the email last night to everyone, and so I updated the rest of the teaching plan a little bit until the deadline for the second individual work. And the reason being, because last week, we didn't manage to finish the slides, or actually didn't even manage to finish half of the slides. And so it looks like we'll need a bit more time and before we can cover everything needed for the second coursework. Okay, and so what I did now is and the coursework 2 will be due in week 16, and that was week 15. And then I add one more week, week 15, and to go through the requirements for the coursework 2, but also we'll use that week to cover whatever we didn't manage to cover for the week 13 and 14 in this week. And so as a result, and I also updated the submission deadline. And so you can see now for coursework 2, and the deadline becomes the 2nd of February, sorry, the 4th of February. And that was 1 week later than before now. I think 28th before. And then also, if you have an extension for 2 weeks, and that means your deadline and will be 2 weeks after this. So that will be the 18th of February. That will be extension. And also, and if you have an extension, you don't have to wait till the deadline 18th to submit. And if you finished earlier, you can always submit earlier. Okay, and okay, let me get back to the lecture slides. Okay, and so once we created a route, in this case, and this one here, oops, something like this. And the next step is actually to test it. And so as we mentioned before, and you can do a test like we do here, and by typing the URL in the browser. But the limitation is, and this kind of test can only do GET type of request. We mentioned that there are at least 4 types, and other types as well. And the other type including post, put, and delete. So these allows you to make changes to the database, whereas the GET is usually used to retrieving data from the database. And so to test other type of requests like post or put, and you started to use other tools. You can't just use browser. And so one of these tools is curl, and which is the command line tool to do these things. And so all you need to do is just typing, open the browser window. For example, this is called terminal on Mac, and I can type curl. Yeah, and so for example, that means if you get some information like this, and that means it's already available. Otherwise, you had errors, say the command cannot be found, and this is not available by default on Windows, and it might change, but I don't use Windows, so I don't know. You can download online and then install it, and you can use it. I think if I just do localhost 3000, maybe the server stopped again. Yeah. Load them all. Good. And so you can do simple example in this case. And I didn't type anything, a type of request. And so that will be default what we get, and then typing the URL, and you get this message back, which is exactly as we intended to do here. Okay. And you can use this to do other types of requests. And that's the main point. Okay. And you can also use -v, which stands for, I think, usually for verbals, which give you a bit more details than this. I can do. Okay, so that gives you a little bit more information, and that's again failed probably because we had this error. That's because the connection to the database error. Okay, so we start the server again, and you get a bit more information. So we have these ones, some extra information, and these might be useful. And if you want to, if there's error, you want to know what caused the error, or you didn't get any response whatsoever, and then these might be useful. Okay, and so that's useful. Okay, and if you want to do other type of requests, the put, post, and delete, and you need to use the -X parameter or switch or option. Okay, and then this is one of the example, and also you here using -D, and which is the data. So you can imagine if I want to adding a new record or create or update an existing record in the database, you need to send some data to the backend. besides the request of the URL. So this is where these comes in. So this -d actually allows you to type in or include the actual data you want to send besides the URL. And this is setting the headers, and that's specifying I'm sending a JSON data to the backend. So it tells this is JSON, so not text or number or any other data format. And this is will be your URL. Okay. Okay. And as you can see, and this command can get quite long and quite quickly. And if you, especially when you're developing, you might have to do this testing multiple times, for example, before it is actually working. And if you want your code to be more robust, you might want to do different types of tests as well. Okay, and so that becomes, if you have to type in several lines of code each time, becomes quite tedious. Okay, and so this is where Postman comes in, and it is a tool and does essentially what the curl does, but it has a graphical user interface, something looks like this, and make it much easier. In the sense, you could save a request, and then you can run it repeatedly afterwards. You don't have to type in again and again. Okay, and so, last time we talked about, it's possible actually to either download Postman or run it online. It has a web version, which means you don't have to install. Okay, and so the recommendation is to actually using the online version, but there's always a but, and the problem with the online version is it cannot access your local server. So in the sense, and if you're running the Node.js server on your laptop and you starting it with, say, accessing it with localhost 3000, and the online version cannot access it. In the sense, and the online version is running on the Postman server, and it needs access to your laptop and to be able to access localhost 3000. And usually this is blocked for security services. And so the web server can't just access anything on your own computer. And it's possible to change this, but depends. And it is quite complicated, or probably that's not the worst of the effort. And for the case, for example, and when you use this on campus, and I'm not sure even it's possible to change the firewall settings because you don't really have any controls to university firewall. Okay, and so the recommendation will be you use this, and later when we actually running the server on Heroku, which is the online, it's not on your computer. And for now, we're going to just use it. We have to install a local version to test it locally. And so this is the URL for the online version. Yeah, okay, so this is already me logged in. Okay, and this is what, if you haven't logged in before, which is very similar to a local one. And so what we covered here, well, we'll work both for the online and the local version, as you said. And once you go there, or either you download and run it the first time, and it will show interfaces like this, ask you to log in. And so you have to create an account to use it. And it is free to use. Okay. And so once you download and install it, and the first thing to do is to create a so-called workspace. Okay. And so the one workspace, you can put all the different test requests and in one place, almost working like a folder for your different, or more like a drive on a computer. And so as we have already seen, actually I'll run my local version because that's what Postman. Okay, yeah, and so this is my local version, and yours I hope will look similar, but maybe there will be some changes between the Mac and Windows versions, and you either create an account or sign in. As I'm already signing before, I have accounts, so I'm going to sign in. I think I was using the Google by Google Gmail account. Okay. Okay, let me see if I can just make it bigger. Yeah. So essentially, I think this is just running a browser. So I think, for example, I can use Control and plus and Control minus just to change the font size. Okay, anyway, and so the first time it will ask you to create a workspace, and I already created one. Okay, and then here is where you create all your different request tests. Okay, let's get back to the lecture. Okay, and then so it is recommended the first thing to do is actually create a new collection. And so the collection is the equivalent of a folder, and inside one collections, you can have multiple tests. And for example, for one backend, and you can have one folder, and in the real world, you can have multiple servers or services, each have its own set of and REST API access point, and each of them would have a folder. Okay, if I go to my local one, so you can see I'm already have 3 here: after school, demo, and pet store. Okay, for example, I can delete this one. Delete. Okay, and then I can create a new one. I'll click the plus sign here. Okay, it says new collection. I say demo. Okay, so now I have a folder. You click it. So this is empty so far. And I think there's a few ways. And this is creating a collection. I think probably this one here would allow you to create a request. You can click here, which also give you a request. And I'm sure there's some other plus buttons somewhere you can use to create actual requests. Okay, we're going to use this plus sign and to create a request. And then you need to first choose the type of method. And this can be get, put, or delete, post, etc. And you type in the URL. And then here are the 2 buttons. The send button means you send the request. So that means you send what you typed in here to the local server, and the server response will be here. And if it's error, the error message will also appear here. And the save buttons, which allows you to give and save the request you just created so you can reuse later. But this is also where and it will save the request to one of the collections you created. Okay, so let's create the simple one first. I keep forgetting. So we go to the Postman, we click this button, and you're allowed to create a request. So you can see, and you can choose all these different type of requests: get, post, put, delete, are the ones we're going to use, and there's many other ones you can use. Okay, and type in the URL here, localhost 3000. Okay, and you can click send now, and you should get a response back. And could not send the request, connection refused. So that's because the local server had error. Now it's stopped again. And so I'm going to stop and restart, and I can send again. Okay, and you can see the results is back here now, and that's the message you should be receiving when it's run properly. And then to save this, click here, and you give it a name. For example, get root. So I say this is my guest root, so that's the root, and they can choose which one, which collection you want to save to. I'm gonna save as demo, and then click save. Okay, so now you can see I have the get root here now, and then I can use this later on for. Basically, I can run this again and again after school and postal, for example. And this is one I created early on. I'm not sure if it's last year actually. Not sure if it's actually still working, but here I'm using get. I'm saying localhost 3000 / collections / products, and I'll click send. Yeah, I'm probably getting an error message here. And that's because this error here. Okay, and let me quickly check using a different one to see if that makes any difference. This is the REST / collection. Yeah, this is a server. It seems to be similar. Let me try server first. Stop. Okay, and so for this one, at least it has this one, collection / collection name. And let me try this in Postman, as we said. Okay, maybe I'll just create it here again. We got the plus. This is in get, and localhost 3000 / products. I'll send. Okay. So still couldn't, and you can see some error message there. Oh, it's getting better. And if you click here, yeah, it still can't access the database. Okay. And we're going to cover this later as well. I think we mentioned it briefly. In the Mango Atlas, and it has something to do, you need to configure the network access. And so in this case, okay, so you need to put in all the IP addresses as allowed to access. And so this was the Middlesex IP address, but this one there's no guarantee, it might change. And also I put this one here, and that basically means it allows everything. So that's not this one blocking, not on the server side. It's really on the client side, which is my computer. It's not.
And you get these IP addresses from the campus.
Sorry?
Can you get these information, like these IP addresses, from the campus as well? Or do you need to...
And we mentioned this before, and if you want to know your IP address, okay, so you need the IP address, which is what the an external computer sees you. It's not, for example, okay, this is beyond this module, but in the network, you would know, an university has its own local network, and each computer gets assigned an IP address that's only valid within the university network. In your home, then you have multiple devices connected to the router, you have local IP address, and what you need here is the external IP address, which is what the, say, a server outside your home or university would see. And what you need to do is just Google and what is my IP address? What is my IP address? Okay, and so that you can see, it will say this is your IP address and this is your public IP address. Okay. And this is something, if you want to, you should add here. And just be aware, and this thing will change. For example, if you're at home, I think every time you restart your router, and the IP address, the public IP address will change, it's not fixed. And obviously for the university, this changed as well. So this is quite different from the one I said before. Okay. And so I already mentioned this in the lecture before, and you can type in adding this, that essentially means allows any IP addresses, which is not secure, but make life a little bit easier here. Okay, and so obviously that example still doesn't work. Yeah, we still have the same error. The other one, yes. Okay, and if I run the same, let's go to Postman, and I'll say the same message again. Yeah, you still got the same error. No preview. Yeah. Okay, but at least you can see now I don't have to type in these commands again and again. I already have it saved. And I can also save this one. I call it get products, save to demo, and just choose save. So I now have 2 requests. Okay, and so this is how I use Postman. Lecture, yeah. So once you saved, you should be see it on the left-hand side. You can see now we have demo, we have these 2, and just create it, get root and get products. Okay, and this is adding more requests, and this is another option using the new button here, which is still here, and which is slightly different now. Okay, and so this is the retrieving collection URL, which is all the requests we just created. We've done this already. And when it's working properly, you would get all these and list of information here. Okay. Yeah.
Untitled Chapter, yeah. The Postman. How do you
Sorry,
submit
I
Postman?
didn't quite get it.
The Postman, how you submit to your files? So
How do you what?
do you need to export it or import this to show we done it or?
Okay. And so this is about exporting requests for the test created in Postman. And so if you just need to use it within the Postman, you don't need to export it. And so essentially these things are saved on the Postman server. If you run the Postman on a different computer or the online interface, and it should just work. And then for this is later, we will cover or discuss in more details. And for the coursework submission, you need to export the Postman test you created. And in those cases, and you need to export, there is some options there. I think even just here, let me see, I can't remember now. Yeah, so if you just, oops. And if you click here, you have the export option, and then you can export your created test request into a JSON file and just submit that. We'll come back to that later when we actually talk about the next individual one. Oh, okay. Yeah, so this is what it should display. So when the server is working, and this should give you the list of the products stored in the collection. Okay, and so now we're going to talk about other type of requests. And the first would be post. Okay, and so now we're actually starting to make some changes to the database. So for the GET request, we only get information from the database. We don't change anything. Okay. Okay, so here, the main difference you need to know is now, and this is not updating. Here, the main difference is this. So before, and we used app.get, if you remember, or let's just have a look at the code. You can see now we use app.get. So that's for our GET request. We're going to go back to the demos we created. Okay. And when you use other type of requests, and so you change this to app.post, app.put, or app.delete, and any other type of request. So what we're seeing here, you can do many different types of requests besides the get, put, post, etc. Okay, and you can see once we change the type of request, and the URL can be exactly the same. We don't have to change the URL, and the Express server would automatically select the right route just by using the type of request. So you can see I'm using exactly the same URL, the path, as the one I used for the get, but there will not be any confusion. So that's the one, the get path, exactly the same. Okay, and then the actual command would also change. And because now we actually want to insert something, so we don't use and collection dot and find anymore, and we use collection dot insert. And these are the information that will be inserted into the database. So here we already selected the collections based on this collection name, and which would depends on what you send a request to. It could be products, could be user, could be orders, or any other collections. And then this dot body will be the body property of your request, which is including the JSON, in our case, the JSON object you want to insert into the database. And you have to make sure that and follows the correct format. And so this will be the not allow me to highlight it. Okay, this will be the callback. And so once this insertion, the insert operation completes, and it will send some message back, and it could be an error, or if it's or some results object. So if this failed, and it will give you error, and then you can return next error. So return the error message to the user, and then if it's results, and the actual, for example, maybe depends on so that's the message sent by the MongoDB server, and the actual message is stored in the results.ops. I forgot what ops represents for, but that's the actual message. The results itself is a JSON object with other things, and this is the actual message. Okay, we can add one and to our code, but I highly doubt it's gonna work. And since the get and couldn't actually access the database, I don't think that. But we'll do one anyway. So let's say app.post. And so this is the most important thing. It has to be something different. And then it will be okay. And then this is your pass. Okay, and you don't have to choose the same pass as before. That's completely fine. For example, I can just say I take this out. I just call it collection name. So that means I only requires a name. I don't need any special pass, and that will be completely fine. And so as when you send the request, you send the correct way. Then we will have okay. So the request, response, next. So these three are the same as before. Request dot collection. Insert. Okay, this is here. Here is the MongoDB operations. This is very similar to what you would type. MongoDB, and you're gonna insert the body part of the request, and what you get back could be an error or something else. And for this part, why is this an error? Of course. Arrow. Okay. And then if there's error, we're gonna return error. Why is this? No. Ah. Forgot that one. Otherwise, if there's no error, we're gonna send the message, which is without. Okay, and then I can run my server here now, which will have an error again, for sure. I have to change back. Yeah. That was called index. Okay, and then we'll be running. And then in the Postman, I can actually start testing this now. And I assume that's the next year. So I can add a new request. And this time I'm going to be using post and then the URL. And in our case, we'll not have /collections because that's how we define in the code, which is slightly different. You can see here, we only have, we need /. So that all makes it, sorry, wrong place. /comment, sorry, done correctly. And so with slightly different URL. Okay, as I said, the difference here is now there's also information you need to send back to the server, which is the JSON object you want to store into the database or add to the database. And so you can't just click send yet. In that case, we'll send an empty request, which will create an empty record, or maybe not creating anything in the MongoDB. And instead, and you need to choose body, which indicates the body part of your request, and then choose JSON. And you can type in the actual data that you want to install afterwards. And then any results, if it's successful, just this part, it will send the results back, results.op, and it will be displayed here. So in this case, it is installed and inserted successfully, and you had the ID, title, and price as here, but also this is the ID, which is the ID MongoDB created for each new JSON document. Okay, and so I'm going to do that in Postman now. I'll go here. I'm going to create a new, and this time I'm going to using post, and there will be localhost 3000. Have /collection. We only do products, and I click the save. So this will be called post. Something like this, and this will be saved in demo. Save here. And actually, if you look at this side, and you can see the type of requests, and on the left, so these two are get, this is post, so you don't have to include that in your name. Okay, as I said before, and you need to actually send something. Choose raw data. I'm gonna choose JSON object, so it knows how to handle. So let's say, do I have to type the? Okay, I think, yeah, I have to use double quote all the time. Product. Okay, let's just see what ID is 1002. And then let's say up to, oh, this part has to be in double quote again. And then price. Again, price needs to be in double quote. 50. Okay, and you can save as well. So this will be saved, and then you click send. Yeah. Obviously, and this is not going to be working because the server is probably done again already. Have to restart. We can do this. Okay, and it knows it's working. And if we run this one now, yeah, and so you get an error message, and so that's the role. You can choose preview, so this highlighted, it's very formatted, it's a removed formatting information, and it still give you the same type of error, having difficult access to the database. Okay, but you should, and this should work for you at home. Okay, and the main point difference now is when you're creating, say, a post or a put, you need to add body, choose your JSON object, because we're going to use save, and updating JSON and putting the actual and JSON file here. So that's a post. Okay, and we covered all these already, and how do you including the data in the request. So as we mentioned before, you could do this using curl as well, but obviously it's easier to do it this way with Postman. Okay, and also if you've done this correctly and the server was running properly, and you should be able to see that in the MongoDB. So you go to your either Campus, or you can just go to and Atlas, and you go browse collection. And if you look at web store and look at products, and you should have a new one installed and inserted here. Yeah, and had lots of new products in, obviously, and in our cases, and it didn't work, so there would not have be anything new here. And sometimes you may have to click this refresh button and just to force it to reload everything. It might not display the new ones straight away. Okay. And let's see how we are doing in time. Okay, we've got about half an hour to go, so hopefully we can, wow, finish this today. Okay, and also you can run an older request within a collection in Postman. And for example, you create a site, a collection of 3 or maybe 5 or even more and collections. And sometimes you create a new route, and you also want to test other routes just to make sure this new route doesn't affect any other route. So that instead of have to run each of these routes manually, you select and click send, and you can run all of them in one go. And so you click this option and then choose run for the entire collection. Okay, I can do demo here. I think it's now in here. Again, straight dot next to the demo, and you run collection. You can choose which one to run, and you say run demo. Yeah, and you get whatever result. So hopefully it's all correct. In this case, no, because the server here is done again. Okay, but let me restart the server. I can run again. Yeah, so you can see get is fine. Its status you can see here 200 okay, and for get you get 500 internal server error, and again for post you can have 500 internal server error, which we're all seeing before what it looks like. And so this way you can run the entire collection quite easily. Sorry. Okay, get back to the actual slides. Yeah, and so this is the summary of the run result, and which looks slightly different than now. And so that's the old version, but give you essentially the similar information in this case, and the 2 get and 1 post, and are all run successfully. They all have 200 okay response. And this also give you the time it takes to run, and how much data was sent and received. Okay, and then here I'm going to show you another very specific GET request, and which allows you to, instead of getting everything from the collection, it will choose a particular object, for example, a product with a specific ID. Okay, and in this time, we're going to use a slightly different path for the route. We're going to say /column collection name, and then we can also add /column ID at the end. So here the ID will become a second parameter, and we're going to use this ID to retrieve a particular items and from the database or from the MongoDB collection. Okay, and then we need to also modify the MongoDB query itself a little bit. So instead of using find, I'm going to use find one. So as the name indicates, it's only return one object.
Excuse me, Professor, is there any chance you could answer some of the questions we post on the chat box?
Oh, okay. Let me see. There's a question asking, what do you mean by splitting the project into 2 repositories? Okay, so again, I think that's the question makes more sense if you haven't read the requirement for course 2 yet. And so the idea is, one way to do this is to put the front end in one repository and the back end in the different repository. And so you have one repository contains all the view code and the other repository has the node code. So that's what I meant there.
Can we see any example of that?
Yes, and we're going to come to that later. But also,
all right.
And what you have now, and is more or less that. For example, you already have your front end from coursework 1, which sits in your GitHub repository. And for the second group work, you create a repository for the backend. So that's why you already have 2 repository, one for the front end, one for the backend. If that makes sense.
Yes, it makes sense. How to manage these 2 repository with Heroku? Because
Okay,
with
and so for the Heroku, and your Heroku is only for the backend, and the front end you can leave it as there is running on the GitHub pages. That's fine. And then later we cover how to run the backend on Heroku, the node part. And for the second coursework, what you need to do, you need to make some changes to your front end code in the first repository, which still runs on GitHub pages. But the thing is, it will get data using the fetch request to send to these and REST API to run Heroku.
To the server. Yeah. So essentially, Heroku won't be able to provide the website, but just the server.
Yes, and that's one way
not the
to
page.
do it. And also, it is possible to render the front end or including the front end on the Heroku server as well. You can have a public folder inside your Node.js code project, which including the HTML, CSS, and view code there.
In that case, it wouldn't be 2 repository. In this case, we are merging the 2 projects.
Yeah.
Is it allowed for the coursework 2 to merge the two things, front end and back end, in just one repository?
I think it should be okay. That should be okay for the coursework.
It should be okay. All right. All right. Just one more question. I write it down on the chat box. The last question is, where is my question, please? Yeah.
Okay. And so,
but when HTML usually post requests via the form, the form from HTML.
Yeah.
The form tag. When you post data via a form, that form sends a post request in a form data format. And I noticed that Node.js is not able to decrypt, translate, how to say that, to receive that kind of data. If you try right now to post form data from Postman, to send a post in a form data format from Postman, you will notice that Node.js won't be able to translate, to decrypt this request.
Yeah. And so this is not the recommended way to send a request. So the recommended way is to
HTML form will do.
Yeah, and the recommended way is to use a fetch request in the front end, So the inside the fetch request, and you can set the type of request default. So we use the fetch in the first coursework. It didn't set the type, so that
Yeah, that's
becomes
clear.
get, which is default. And you can actually say whether it's post or put or delete in the fetch request as well, and including the actual data. So the recommended way is, for example, you have a button on your page, you click it, and then in your view code, it will run the fetch. And then
yes, indeed, I got it. But what about what if you want just the form to send the post request instead of catching the request with the fetch? I mean, just make the form work as it is supposed to be without passing the request with the fetch.
So then we have to set up the request when you click the button. So how it was sent
without any JS code, without any JS code. I mean, I'm just thinking how to manage.
I'm not sure if it's possible to, without any JS code, say when you click the say submit button of your form, it would not know which URL to send the data to.
Yeah, it is
you
possible
have to set
submit
it somewhere.
data without JS, just with HTML forms. Without any JS, it is possible. The form tag perform a request, yeah.
Okay, and if you really want to do this, you can do a little bit of research. I don't think we cover that in this module.
Yeah, I did, and I found a solution, but I just wanted to know if you would have approached a similar problem in the same way.
I think for the coursework, we require you to use fetch. And
yeah, you're right.
Like to experiment with other types, that's fine. Yeah.
All right. Never mind. I will do some research about it.
Yeah.
Thank you, though.
Okay. So there's one more question in terms of recommending using online or local version of Postman. And so if you are running the Node.js code locally and you have to use local version, as I did here, I installed it and running it here. And because the online version cannot access local Node.js server easily. And once we move the server to the Postman, once we move the server, Node.js server to the Heroku, I would recommend using the online version. And because it's easier, you don't have to install anything locally. And also, because either the local and the online version connected to the same account. So whatever, say the collections and requests you created locally, it would be available on your local and Postman as well. So this is my local, I have these ones. And if I go to my online, I can't remember the URL now, it will be web. Yeah. And so this will be my online account. And it will, if I go to my workspace, and you can see exactly the same set of requests are there. So it will be consistent across and local or online. Request inform data, yeah. And okay, I'll go back to the slides now. And yeah, so actually, okay, so I saw the question about using form submit. And so if there's something you're interested, I mean, I personally not familiar with that, and I think we can discuss more and in the lab. And okay, I will try to at least finish the lecture today. And again, we are kind of running behind. Okay.
Thank you.
So yeah, so this is another route which shows you how to retrieve a particularly an object in the collection by using ID, and you need to define a second parameter. Again, so the column gives you the indicate this is a parameter, the parameter name is called ID. Okay, and this will be what the request looks like. Okay, and so this is to retrieving an items from, how do I say, by the special ID created by the MongoDB. And so if you look at here, for each of these objects would have this ID. So now we're trying to retrieve an object by using this ID. And you can retrieve this using these attributes, say ID, title, description, and that's also fine. And we just have to update the, or change the code accordingly. And whereas in this case, we're going to try to use and this ID as a way to retrieve an object. Okay. So that's why you need this, because this is a special type of object. And so you need to get this, and from the MongoDB module we imported. And so this is called a .object ID. That's a special type of object. If you remember, and previously when we tried to get a MongoDB connection, we need to require MongoDB and I think it was Mongo client. And here, if you want to use that ID, you have to use this. If you just need to say product name or price, and you don't need these. Okay, and so this is the pass. Exact pass you can decide, but importantly, we need one parameter for the collection and another parameter for the ID. And this could be product ID or name or something, depends on you. Okay, and then in terms of actually MongoDB query, and you're going to be using find one, and similar as before, and you say the property of ID. So this will match this here. So essentially that's the name of the property or key. And then you say new object ID requirements dot parameters dot ID. Okay, so here this one is creating a special object ID for MongoDB. This is what we created here, and its values would be what the ID included in the request URL. So you can get this from request object parameters dot ID. Okay, and so the only difference is the query here will be slightly different. For example, if you're using product ID and you don't need this line, and all you can say, it just says product ID here, and its value would be an request.parameters.id, and that would be fine. And this part is the same, and so you get either an error object and a result object. And then if it's error, you return error, otherwise you send the results back. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Again, you can create a request and in MongoDB by typing the URL here. Now, in this case, it's very small, but you can see, and it includes the product name, sorry, the collection name, which is products, and then the JSON object ID, which is something you have to get from here. You have to copy it from here. And then you can run the request, and if successful, it will return the results here. And I'm not going to try here because I know the server is not running. Okay, and similarly, we can use put, and this is usually used to update. So we did the post before, a few slides back with post, which is creating a new one, and the put will be updating the existing one For example, you want to update the price or availability of a product. Okay, and we can still use a very similar URL or the route path. And the only thing we need to change is just changing the type to put. Okay, and then in terms of actual query you need to use the update methods of the MongoDB. And in this case, we're going to just replace the entire object rather than say change the particular values or the attributes inside the. Okay. And in the results, it will give you a number of objects being updated. Will be 1 if there's only one object, or 0, that means nothing is found. Okay, and this is the code. Okay, and so the important here is now we change the type to put, so it's not get or post anymore. And the URL is similar to the previous ones. We have 2 parameters and the collection and the object ID. And you can use a different way to find your particular JSON object you want to update. And using ID usually means you will only update 1. But for example, if you have after school, and after school lessons, and you update by, for example, and lesson title, you can put in math, and then all the subject with title math will be updated. Okay, in this case, we're going to be updating by using the MongoDB ID, and then we have to use this to create an ID object or MongoDB ID object. Okay, and this is just to say, and I want to use a safe update and not allow multiple updates on the same record at the same time, and just a safer way. Okay. Okay, sorry. I was looking for. So this is the actual command. And so the request.collection, so let's do as before. And so we're going to using update now. So we had find, had insert. Now we use update. And so this selects which object to update. And this one, it's just replacing the entire JSON documents and with the body of the request. And so this is not just updating only the price or something. You have to include in the body everything. So if you only have body, then you're going to lose title, location, and other attributes of the object. And this is just a way of safe, and which is explained here. And then the return will get either null, that means it's not successful, nothing is updated. And sometimes just because the ID is not correct, that's also fine. But sometimes it could be there's a problem with the query itself or the code. That's something you need to fix. And if there's one document updated, you get 1 back. Okay, again, you can create this request, test request in Postman, and make sure you choose and put as the methods now. That's the URL. In this case, again, we're using the object ID. You need to copy, and from the MongoDB, in the body, you have the role. Okay, and in this case, we're going to just update the price to 49. Okay. I forgot now. And sorry. So actually, you don't need to repeat the other part. You only need to say the part you want to change. And so I said price 49. So the price is got changed now. The other things is not. And it's just still there as before. Okay. Again, and because of time and it's not working, so I can't really demo that. And I think this will be the last examples, and we're going to delete. Again, the URL is the same as before. You have to specify the collection and the ID of the object you want to delete. And the only thing we change is the type of request you need to delete. And so you say app.delete, and instead of post, put or get. And then here, the actual MongoDB operation also changes now. Use delete one, and instead of the update we had before. And you need to specify, in this case, the ID. You're going to have to use the object ID, MongoDB object, and you get that value from the ID parameter from your request. And again, you get a response back. And so if it's error, if n equal to 1, that means successfully deleted. Here, it will only delete one because we use delete one. And there's other command, I think just called delete, which you can delete for multiple JSON objects, which meet the requirement. Okay, and again, you can create one, and in Postman, so make sure you choose the delete and request type, and then typing the URL, in the URL including the collection name and object ID. And in this case, you don't need to send any data in the body because there's no data to send to the database. And you just click send, and then you will get a message back if it's successful, or an error message if it's not. Okay, that's it now. And so, and this is essentially just putting all the code together. So including the initial one, requesting all the needed modules and start them. So this here, requesting express and start express app, and use this to pass parameters. And then here we request the MongoDB or the required MongoDB module, and this creates a connection to the database. Obviously, you need to replace this one for your Atlas URL and username password. And this is to get the parameters out of the. Okay, and these are then the different routes we created, one through the lecture, was this last week, and a get and root route, which is return the message, and then get all the records from a specific collection. And here that one needs a collection name in the parameter, and here use find. And then here we retrieve just a single object by ID. Again, we need the collection name, and then we also need the ID for that particular JSON object. And then we're using find one, and that's the syntax to find one object. And this is for adding an object. So the main difference will be now you need to post instead of using get, and you only need to specify your collection you want to insert or add this object to. You don't put the actual data in the request, and you put that in the request body, and which we've seen how you do that in the Postman. You set the body up, and by copying that set to JSON and actually creating the JSON code in the body part. Okay, and then this is the update by ID, and similar route path, also including the ID objects, and we use that to select the ID, and then the body will be updated in the body of this request. And finally, and very similarly, doing a delete. And okay, and that's the reading. So it's useful to read this book, and also how to use a specific and MongoDB command, for example, update, delete, and other MongoDB command, you need to look at the MongoDB.js driver tutorial, and it tells you how to use these. That link is not working, so probably it's best to search for that. Don't think that's the one. Yeah. Anyway, I'm sure you can find the right one for you. Okay, and we still have a few minutes, but I think it's probably and not enough time to start on the next lecture. I will start the next one next week and try to cover the requirements for coursework 2 as well. Okay. Oh, there's a few. Okay, and I don't see any new questions. And unless there's more question, I will stop here now.